Cool. So, well, thank you ever so much for being here and to make this happen. And obviously to the sponsors, really thanks to them that these events continue thriving throughout the world. And we're talking about 6 principles today to guide our decisions or the overarching principles of design. I couldn't make my mind up of how to call this session. So, essentially, these principles are everywhere. They governing principles, and once, hopefully, after this session, once sort of you see this, it becomes like high definition glasses. So, um, also to say that I'm gonna check a lot of ideas and thoughts and information, but this is not really a talk show. So in the setting that we have, be ready to pop things in the chat as we go. I like to envision this as something like the image like here, where I'm obviously the cool wise lady in the middle, and the aim is to turn it out more something like this, because I argue with the work that we do that we are all inventors, and we shouldn't forget the creative part of the work that we do. And how we create, how we design matters. And I'm going to bring some thoughts that potentially are going to be totally new territory for us, and that's okay. So I am going to need everyone's input. And in essence, at its core, what we're going to do over here is a translation exercise. In a sense, this is what we do every day. We take ideas, concepts, requests, and then we translate them into something. We create them in something that is tangible, that is visible, with the knowledge, the skills, and the tools that we have at hand. Now we have very, very little time for this session. So it may be a bit lightning speed. But what I would like to do is, as I go through each one of the principles, when things comes to mind, or you can find how they relate with Salesforce specifically, or Teams, or something else, just pop it in the chat, and then we work through this. Now, I also hope that after today, some of those ideas and concepts, you're going to take them and you're going to apply them. When you bring them across in your day-to-day, be wary of dynamics in terms of moving from the very reactive, yes, but when we're talking with somebody else about new ideas, to a much more enhancing and inclusive yes, and so where we can build upon each other's ideas, like a wonderful, flavorful dish, right? Many ingredients. All right, so if you thought this, because I am around, is going to be about agile, Salesforce and agile, not quite. So, but don't get this hard, and you can grab this URL at the top, and you can get a free training about Salesforce Agile that I did with Tom Robbins. There you go. Today I'm wearing a hat more like the images at the bottom. I'm circular economy professional from Cambridge, a biomimicry practitioner. You'll find out more what that means in a minute. Wrote a book about sustainability a couple of years ago. And I'm part of the Agile Alliance Sustainability Initiative. And just yesterday, we launched the Agile Sustainability Manifesto. So if that is something interests you, please have a look. In essence, what I do every day is help organizations to reduce waste. And we think of waste in agile and development on time and finance, but it's also about effort, materials, and energy. So for that, I would love to introduce you some fresh perspective. Has anyone seen this before? All right, these are the grand reveal of the life principles. This is biomimicry in its core. Biomimicry, essentially what it means is when you are confronted with a challenge, you turn into nature geniuses that already exist and have been refining their strategies, their mechanisms, their functions for almost 4 billion years of existence, right? This is experience and innovation that we can tap into rather than start trying to solve a problem from a blank canvas. And its core, what it has is that whatever it does is creating conditions that are conducive to life. Imagine if everything we did had this at its core, creating conditions that are conducive to life. Now, I believe that the future is not to be predicted, but is to be created, right? We need to be able to imagine it, to create it. So it's really up to us. Now, the top half of this life principles is all about develop. And in a way that we develop so that we are locally attuned and aware of what's happening at local level, we are able to adapt to changing conditions. And this skill is going to become more and more apparent, especially in the face of climate change. And then this idea of being dynamic in the way that we evolve is not static, right? And think about our applications, how sometimes we just chuck something and think that that will be it forever. The bottom half is all about how we grow, and this idea of integrating development, the top half, with growth in a way that is balanced, is efficient in the way that it uses resources. So, aligning speed, principle one. Nature integrates development with growth by mainly three strategies. It self-organizes, builds from the bottom up, and uses modular and nested components. Now, what I'm going to try to do in every principle is sort of show you three buckets. I like to organize things in a visual manner. First one is about examples of nature of how those strategies are used. Second one, in terms of team and organization dynamics. And third one is Salesforce. And again, remember, as I go through the motions, if anything comes to mind, just pop it in the chat so we can tap into each other's potential. Now, with this idea, think about a tree. A tree doesn't just grow taller, it also grows its roots and its leaves, right? This idea of combining modular and nested components. Now, how does that translate into what we do every day? In terms of team and organization dynamics, for me, these ideas of self-organization, building from the bottom up, and these components sort of decoupling, it makes me think about holacracy, right? It was essentially a system of self-management, which is not subject to a traditional hierarchy of command. And if we think about organizational charge, which is from the 1800s, they haven't really evolved. This hierarchy, nature uses hierarchy to reduce change, to avoid change. And in the way that we develop and behave, one would imagine that is completely the opposite what we're trying to do. All right, so perhaps it's still abstract concepts, but how can we design our applications with this one principle? So a few things come to mind quite obvious to me. One is this idea of separation of concerns. So for us to be able to integrate development with growth in a way that is sustainable, in a way that our applications can flex, can be locally attuned and adaptive, this idea of decoupling matters. Also, the use of common frameworks like the Lightning design system are there for us to tap into as modular components. Caching strategies also, so we can reduce the load of the pages. Think about Lightning Data Service or the catchable Apex methods. And again, if more things come to mind, just pop it in the chat. All right, principle two. Now we're going to speed up a bit. To be locally attuned and responsive. Now, nature does this by these four main strategies. Cyclic processes using ready available materials and energy, so things that are local, it doesn't go to the other side of the world to catch that. Feedback loops and cooperation. So for this, nature-wise, I would love to introduce you slime mold over here. It's a single-cell organism that is often lovingly referred as a SpongeBob. It's not a sponge, it's a slime mold. And the thing that I find fascinating about this is that it will always find the optimal route. So, for example, if you have a maze in small scale and you put some food in the middle, the organism is going to find the most efficient way to get to it. And even it was used, the slime mold, to enhance the design of the railway system in Japan around Tokyo. And the most interesting thing to me is that it did so with redundancy built in, meaning that if one line of the railway was closed, you could still get to destination, or overcrowded, you still could get there. Thinking about team dynamics, one of the obvious example for me is that, for example, frameworks like Scrum, it really gives you rhythm, right? The cyclic processes that avail this idea that you tap into your existing potential, available materials and energy, essentially is mini and macro feedback loops and cooperation at its core. So how about Salesforce instances? Well, we have tons of things with these ideas in mind. How can we apply login framework, right? Those feedback loops. How can we reduce distance of the data traveling? For example, if we take Lightning Web Components best practices, right? How can we reduce that data traversing across the internet? Where the source of energy across the value chain comes from. Maybe we schedule our processing when renewables are plentiful. Principle 3, which is about adapting to changing conditions. And nature does this mainly by 3 strategies: incorporating diversity, maintaining integrity through self-renewal, and embodying resilience. And I sort of touched resilience a little bit, redundancy, especially before. Resilience, we talk a lot about it, but we don't tangibly put it in place. Now, nature does this with 3 main things: variation, redundancy, and decentralization. And especially redundancy, we tend to think about it on a negative connotation. In fact, having redundancy built into the system, it makes a big difference. So, how does nature do this? You know, how about if we mimic some of the strategies that even our own body does? It sort of self rebuilds in less than a year. If we think about team dynamics, it makes me think about dynamic reteaming. I don't know if many of you have heard of this idea, where by default you're incorporating diversity, you sort of swarm at different states and lengths, self renewals, and obviously you're building this sort of institutional knowledge within. If we think about our applications, there are many things that comes to mind, but some is this idea of recovery beyond just one point of failure. Like when things go not as expected, how easy for us is to recover? What are the different paths that we can take? Then many other things in terms of how the Lightning framework, some of the things that has built in. So think about views and pages, apps, is all around use cases rather than themes. Or this idea of event-driven architecture. In essence, what it is decentralized and consumption of less energy. So you can adapt to changing conditions, regardless what the other application is ready to consume or not the event. All right. Principle 4, which is the use of life-friendly chemistry. Now, nature does this essentially by 3 strategies, which is breaking down products to benign constituents, so no harm left behind. Build selectively from a small subset of elements. So I'm sure most of us have seen like the table of elements in science, huge. In essence, nature only uses about 11 of those, normally a combination of very few, 4 or so, out of a subset of 11, although there are many more. And nature does chemistry in wood. And when I say chemistry, we take it a little bit like this, but on wood on room temperature without straining a lot of energy. So, for example, if we think about a snake, the poison of a snake is generated on demand, locally, selectively, only when it's needed, in the amounts that are just needed. And when the job is done, it breaks down in benign constituents without the need of increased storage of nuclear waste capacity year on year. I mean, we get something so wrong. Or the second image there in the middle is a sponge silica, which is creating really robust glass fibers at room temperature, at water temperature, and it can withstand huge amount of pressure. Completely different way how humans, one species, is generating glass. Or the last one, which is Railk, is derived sort of stream bioplastic, and there is a lot of materials, new materials space at the moment. If we think about this idea of life-friendly chemistry, it makes me think about flow, where we invest our energy, and this idea of momentum, right? Sometimes we can burn a lot of energy against resistance. How about our instances? Well, many things, but some could be, how could we avoid overprocessing? How could we have embedded in everything that we do on no harm left behind? Sometimes I see too much validation. I mean, how does that affect to our poor users? We could be using things like prompts or cards, visuals as you work through something rather than no, system sites, no. The principle of being resource efficient. 4 main ways you can be so. Low energy processes, multifunctional design, so things do more than one just function. Upcycle absolutely everything, nothing goes to waste. And then form to function. And we don't tend to think of form to do a function. We tend to think of form to be pleasingly to our eyes. And form to function matters, especially when you're architecting instances. So, for example, think about a forest. A forest has a 2% of waste versus our cities, which are closer to an 80% of waste. Also think about the forest with the idea of multifunctional design. A forest does many things. It builds the soil, collects energy, stores water, creates habitat, holds up moisture. This, if any of you are into permaculture, this idea of stacking functions. The middle organism over there is a water bear or a tardigrade. It's a tiny organism that on extreme conditions goes into cryptobiotic state. That means it doesn't use any energy. And at the moment, there is a lot of trying to tap into this organism to expand the use of vaccines, in a sense that at the moment vaccines are very strenuous sort of logistic process because of the temperatures that it requires for us to move them around. So tapping into some of the existing sort of strategies and mechanisms that these organisms have, it can solve the problems that we confront. And then the last image there is to remind me about upcycling absolutely everything. So a leaf, when a leaf is gone through the cycle, it's done its job. It breaks down into chemical components that can be utilized to even more organisms. It doesn't become another leaf. It becomes shelter, it becomes food, it becomes soil. If we think about teams, makes me think about this idea of fractal organizations, right? Where we have low energy process, much more efficient set of ways of organizing ourselves, multifunction and fitting form to function rather than boxes on a hierarchy. And if we think about Salesforce, like so much, the idea of unit of work or bulk design patterns, even the size of the media that we put into the application, how can we move from archiving strategies into deletion or even into refusal, so not gathering some of parts to start with. One example of using form specifically on architecture, recently I had an app review, and within 15 minutes conversation we halved objects and processing. 15 minutes. Low energy process things like we touch platform events, but also the safe harbor sort of asynchronous processes through the REST API. So lots in this space. And the last principle, which is evolve to survive. So replicate what works, just drop what doesn't. God, sometimes we find that very hard. Integrate the unexpected. The only constant is change, and reshuffle information. So, even thinking of neuroplasticity, studies show that even the brain can regenerate itself, especially after shocks. It doesn't go to the back state, the previous state. It goes into a learned new state from the shock. So with teams, especially in the concept of redundancy, that I like to touch quite a bit, I use this idea, this image, to sort of break through negative connotations and enhance our ability to integrate the unexpected and that institutional knowledge, reshuffling information through things like the buddy system. How can we pair up, peer review, the three amigos? There is tons on that space that you can tap into. And about Salesforce, well, the concepts of patterns. How can we work through beyond just happy path? How can we infuse all that we do with telemetrics, scratch orgs, or similar patterns, for instances, demo dev orgs? Right? So we don't make things to last, we make things to adapt. All right. Hopefully you're a little bit like this. That was the aim. So as you design your solutions, revert to this. And if the intersection of Salesforce and sustainability interests you, please do reach out. I really believe that this transition of regenerative practices in everything that we do, it requires collaboration and expertise from a bunch of people. That's designers, engineers, supply chain managers, waste reduction specialists, you name it, right? So by investing in experienced subject matter experts that have put their time, their effort, their finance into the quest, we can get there quicker. So be part of the solution in a way that we can create a space that generates abundance for us all. So there you go. For the ones that made it to the end, here is your bonus swag. So if you scan this, you're gonna get some more stuff around sustainability and other bonus materials on the matcha because we have very little time anyway. So just scan this on the URL at the bottom. So, and I would like to close the session with this thought. This is home. We must deeply understand this. All our conceptual inventions that doesn't support this home to thrive as a whole are flawed. There are no boundaries. We all breathe the same air. This is our home, which is not ours alone.